The words hit harder than the clatter of silverware. "Go find another table," my son said, calm, confident, smiling that smug little smile he learned from his father. We were in the middle of Red Oak Steakhouse, the kind of place where the lights were dim and the napkins were heavier than the steak itself. The waiter had just poured me a glass of water when my stepson, correction, my son by marriage, not blood, decided to make sure I knew my place. Everyone at the table froze. His wife, Lila, looked down at her menu, pretending to read. My husband, Charles, cleared his throat and said, "Ethan, that's not necessary." But Ethan didn't even blink. "Dad," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this dinner's family only. You know, real family." My hands went cold around the water glass. I could feel my pulse against the rim. "I see," I said softly. "Then what am I?" He shrugged, not even ashamed. "You're, just someone Dad married." The waiter, poor thing, didn't know where to look. I could almost hear his thoughts. Do I walk away, or do I vanish completely? "I've been someone your dad married for 22 years, I said, my voice steady. "I raised you since you were 7. "Yeah," he replied with a smirk, "but you didn't give birth to me." The way he said it, sharp, cruel, deliberate, cut cleaner than any insult I'd ever heard. He knew it too. He looked proud of himself. And then came the cherry on top. "Oh," he added, lifting the leather-bound check presenter from the corner of the table. "Since you invited yourself to this little family dinner, you can cover the bill." He slid it toward me. $3,270. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just expensive, it was symbolic. That's how much our Hawaii vacation had cost 2 decades ago, the one I'd saved for months to surprise both him and Charles after my promotion at the bank. He was 14 then, and back then, he'd hugged me and called me Mom. Now he was handing me a bill like I was a stranger who'd crashed his meal. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell, cry, or leave in shame. I just stared at the numbers, $3,270.32, then calmly reached into my purse. "Of course," I said. "Family dinners should be paid for by family." Lila's head jerked up, her face pale. "Ethan," she began, but I cut her off with a small smile. "It's all right," I said. "It's just money, after all." I placed my card on the tray, folded the receipt, and waited. Charles looked at me like he wanted to apologize, but he didn't. He just sat there silent, a man who had long learned that silence was easier than confrontation. When the waiter returned and thanked me, Ethan grinned. "Guess dinner's on you, Mom," he said, mocking the word. I raised my glass, still smiling. "Yes," I said. "Dinner's on me." And right there, under the dim golden light of that restaurant, I made a promise. He'd humiliated me publicly, in front of strangers, in front of the man I loved, and in front of the woman who now called herself his wife. He thought he'd made me small. He had no idea how wrong he was. When we got home, Charles tried to talk. "Margaret," he said softly, following me into the kitchen. "You know he didn't mean it." I laughed, short and bitter. He said it clearly enough. "He's under stress," he continued. "They're building the new house. Lila lost her job. He's broke," I finished for him. "And spoiled." He sighed. "Please don't start." "Charles," I said, turning to face him, "I started 22 years ago when I paid his school tuition, bought his first car, and helped him get through college. I think I'm allowed to start now." He had no answer. He just looked tired, older than I remembered. "Just let it go," he said at last. I smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Oh, I will," I promised. "I'll let everything go. Including the house he's counting on." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" But I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and went upstairs. Later that night, I sat in the office, the one Ethan used to study in when he lived here. The mahogany shelves still held the old family photos, the certificates, the framed graduation picture where I stood proudly beside him in a navy dress. I looked at it for a long moment, then pulled out the safe key from the drawer. Inside were documents Charles never cared about but I always kept organized: tax papers, insurance policies, and one particular folder labeled Property Ownership, updated 2015. When I opened it, I almost laughed. The house Ethan and Lila lived in, the one Charles had gifted them as a wedding present, wasn't fully transferred. Charles had planned to do it years ago, but he'd never finished the process because I had handled all the legal paperwork and refused to finalize the quitclaim deed until both signed maintenance agreements. They never did. Which meant the house wasn't in Ethan's name. It was still ours. The next morning, I drove out to their place, a big, modern, glass-walled home in the suburbs. Lila answered the door in a robe, surprise flashing across her face. "Margaret? Oh, Ethan's at work." "That's all right," I said. "I came to see you." She hesitated. "Is everything okay?" I smiled. "Depends on how you define okay." We sat in their spotless white kitchen, the kind that looked like no one had ever cooked in it. I placed the folder on the table. "You might want to take a look at this," I said. She opened it, brows knitting together. "This is the deed." "Yes," I said. "It's still under Charles's and my name." Her face drained of color. "But Ethan said." "I know what Ethan said," I interrupted. "He says a lot of things." She swallowed. "So, you still technically own the property?" "Technically," I said, "and legally." She closed the folder slowly. "You're not going to take it, are you?" I smiled again, the same way I had at that restaurant. I paid $3,270 for a dinner that wasn't mine. Let's just say I'll be collecting my refunds soon. That night, I drafted an email to my lawyer. It started simply, "Please begin preparations to list the property located at 107 Cedar Grove Lane for sale." My hands didn't tremble. My conscience didn't ache. Because some lessons, I thought, have to be paid for the same way the bill at that restaurant was, in full. Before I tell you what happened when Ethan found out I sold the house he thought was his, let me ask you something. If your child humiliated you in front of everyone, would you swallow your pride to keep peace, or would you let them taste the cost of their own cruelty? The morning I sent that email to my lawyer, the sun came up calm and golden, the kind of day that makes you think nothing ugly could happen in the world. But sometimes, the cruelest things unfold under clear skies. By the time I'd finished my coffee, I already had a reply from Mr. Benson, our family attorney for over 15 years. "Understood, Margaret. I'll draft the listing agreement today. You and Charles are still legal owners. Shall I proceed with valuation?" I typed back one word, "Yes." It wasn't anger driving me anymore. Anger burns out fast. What I felt now was cleaner, deliberate. The sort of focus you get when you finally stop trying to fix people who enjoy watching you bend. By noon, I drove to the house again, this time with my lawyer. Mr. Benson was a quiet man in his 60s, patient and polite. He'd been there for every estate document, every title transfer, every tax filing. When we arrived, the house looked as polished as ever, white stucco walls, glass balcony railings, the driveway lined with trimmed hedges. It screamed wealth and control, exactly how Ethan liked to be seen. Lila opened the door again, dressed this time, her hair perfectly smooth but her face anxious. "Margaret," she said quickly, glancing behind her. "He's home today. He doesn't know you're coming." "Good," I said. We stepped into the living room just as Ethan came down the stairs. He was in a pressed shirt, phone in hand, that same arrogant confidence plastered across his face. But when he saw Mr. Benson beside me holding the file folder, that smirk faltered. "What's this?" he asked. "Just business," I said lightly. Mr. Benson handed him a document. "Notice of intent to sell," he explained. Ethan's eyes scanned the page. "Sell what?" "The property," I replied. "This house." He laughed. Not the nervous kind, but the one that says you must be joking. "Yeah, sure. Nice prank, Margaret." Mr. Benson cleared his throat. "It's no prank, Mr. Carter. You'll find the ownership details on the second page. The deed remains under Charles and Margaret Carter. You and your wife were beneficiaries of use, not legal owners." Ethan's face shifted. "That's impossible," he snapped. "Dad gave us this house years ago." "Verbally," I said, "but not legally. He never completed the title transfer because I refused to sign without a maintenance agreement. You remember that, don't you? You said it was a waste of time." Lila stepped forward, voice trembling. "Ethan, she's telling the truth. I saw the papers." He turned on her so fast it made me flinch. You what? I saw them, she said. She still owns it. He looked between us, realization dawning and pride collapsing all at once. You wouldn't, he said slowly. You wouldn't dare sell it. I smiled faintly. I dared to raise you when your mother left, didn't I? For the first time since that restaurant dinner, his bravado cracked. Why are you doing this? He asked, voice lower now. Because, I said, you told me I didn't help. So I'm freeing you from my help. Completely. You're ruining my life, he said bitterly. No, I said softly. I'm just handing you the bill you gave me. The next week was chaos. Ethan called Charles, screamed, begged, accused. He claimed I was manipulating him, that I'd gone crazy with resentment. Charles came into my study one evening, holding his phone like it was something toxic. Margaret, he said, he's panicking. They don't have anywhere to go. I looked up from my laptop. Then maybe he should learn to build something that's his. Don't be cruel, he said gently. I smiled tiredly. Cruel was him humiliating me in front of a restaurant full of strangers. Charles rubbed his temples. He's our son. He's your son, I corrected softly. I was just his stepmother. Remember? He sighed. You're proving his point. I met his eyes then. No. I'm proving mine. He didn't say another word. He just left quietly, and I sat there, feeling the ache of truth settle into the room like dust. By Friday, the for sale sign was up. Lila called me that afternoon, voice quivering. Margaret, please. You've made your point. He's ashamed, he's sorry. Did he tell you to say that? I asked. Silence. Then he's trying, I swear. Good, I said. Then maybe he'll finally understand what trying looks like. Margaret, this will destroy him. I closed my eyes. Lila, he already destroyed what mattered, respect. I'm just cleaning up what's left. She started crying softly. I let her. By the end of the month, the offers rolled in. The market was hot, luxury homes were being snatched up faster than anyone could list them. Mr. Benson called me one morning, excitement in his voice. We have a serious buyer, full asking price. Sell it, I said. That same day, Ethan showed up at my house. No warning, no call, just pounding on my front door like a man ready to break it down. When I opened it, he looked nothing like the man who'd smirked over dinner. His hair was unkempt, eyes bloodshot, and his voice cracked as he said, "You can't do this." I already did, I said. You're ruining me. No, I said. I'm teaching you. He stared at me, jaw tight, trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You're not my mother, he spat. I nodded slowly. Thank you for reminding me. He froze, the words bouncing back at him like a mirror. Then his face crumpled. You don't mean that. I sighed softly. I meant it the first time you said it at dinner. He stepped closer. You hate me. I don't hate you, Ethan. I pity you. Because one day, you'll realize that every time I said no, I was protecting you, even now. He looked away, blinking hard, his pride unraveling. I was drunk, he muttered. That night. I didn't mean it. I know, I said. But you did it sober. When the sale closed, I sent him a check for 5%. Enough to remind him I wasn't vindictive, just fair. Along with it, I enclosed a note. Ethan, every dinner has a cost. You taught me that. Consider this your tip for finally finishing your own meal. Margaret. Charles didn't speak to me for a few days after that. When he finally did, he just said, he's moving to Oregon. Starting fresh. That's good, I said. Maybe he'll find humility there. He looked at me, sadness softening his face. Do you regret it? I shook my head. No. But I regret that it had to come to this. He nodded. You know, he said quietly, when you first came into our lives, I thought you'd save us. Turns out, you saved yourself. I didn't answer. Some truths don't need a response. 2 weeks later, I went to Red Oak Steakhouse again, alone this time. The same waiter recognized me. Table for one, Mrs. Carter? Yes, I said, smiling. Same spot as before. When he brought the bill, I looked at the total. $78.54. I paid it, left a generous tip, and wrote a small note on the receipt. Tell your boss, sometimes the best dinners are the quiet ones. As I walked out, I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt light, lighter than I had in years. That night, Charles came into the living room while I was sipping tea. I heard from Ethan, he said softly. He found a job. Smaller place. He asked if I'd tell you he's sorry. I looked out the window, the moonlight painting silver streaks across the floor. Tell him I hope his next table has enough chairs for everyone. Charles smiled faintly. You really don't do halfway, do you? I turned to him, calm and steady. Halfway never taught anyone a lesson. Before I tell you what happened when Ethan returned months later with an envelope and a question I never thought I'd hear, let me ask you this. When someone you raised publicly humiliates you, is forgiveness about letting them back into your heart, or finally learning to live without their approval? It's strange how quickly a scandal can travel in a quiet town. Within a week of the sale, everyone knew. The woman at the grocery store stopped me by the produce aisle. I heard about Ethan's house, she whispered, as if it were state news. Is it true you sold it? I smiled politely, placing apples into a paper bag. You shouldn't believe everything you hear, Diane. But she leaned closer, voice dropping. Good for you though. Some kids forget who raised them. Her words landed heavier than she meant them to. I didn't want praise. I wanted peace. But peace, I was learning, rarely comes quietly, it comes after the storms had its say. A few days later, I got a letter from the realtor confirming the full sale transfer. The number stared back at me, $2,080,000 after taxes and fees. Enough to rebuild my life 3 times over. But I didn't want houses or cars or luxury. I wanted something more lasting, something Ethan would never understand until it was too late. So I did what most women my age do when they're underestimated. I made a plan. Step 1. Secure the money properly. I called my financial advisor, Natalie Brooks, a woman in her 40s with sharp glasses and the kind of calm efficiency I admired. Natalie, I said, I'd like to create a trust. Of course. For your husband? She asked. For my grandchildren, I replied. But not through their father. They'll get access only when they're adults. She paused, understanding flickering across her face. And you don't want Ethan to have any control? None, I said. I've already given him enough. She nodded. Smart. By the time I hung up, the plan was in motion. I wasn't taking revenge out of spite, I was ensuring that everything I built wouldn't rot in ungrateful hands. Step 2. Face the whispers. At church that Sunday, I could feel eyes follow me down the pews. Some curious, some sympathetic, some quietly judgmental. The town loved a story, especially one with money and family betrayal. When service ended, Pastor Lewis approached. Margaret, he said kindly, I heard there's been tension. Tension's a polite word for it, I said. He smiled softly. The Lord tests us in strange ways. Then I must be his favorite student, I said dryly. He chuckled, but then his tone grew serious. You've always been a mother at heart. Don't let bitterness take that from you. I nodded. I'm not bitter, Pastor. I'm just finished. He tilted his head, as though measuring my words. There's a difference between closure and punishment, Margaret. Yes, I said, meeting his gaze. And sometimes they look exactly the same. Step 3. Prepare for the fallout. It didn't take long. The first message came from Ethan a week later. You had no right. That was my home. Then another. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You love control. And finally. You've ruined my life. I hope you're proud. I read each message, then deleted them. No response. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't explaining myself to anyone. Charles saw the messages too. He's hurt, he said softly. So was I replied. He sighed, sitting beside me. You're colder than I remember. Maybe, I said, I'm just done apologizing for surviving. The silence stretched between us after that. Charles didn't take sides, but his loyalty was split down the middle, between the woman who rebuilt his life and the son he couldn't stop seeing as a little boy. One night, I caught him staring at an old family photo on the mantel, Ethan at 16, grinning with braces, me beside him, arm around his shoulder. The photo looked warm, real, almost perfect. "That was a good summer," he murmured. "It was," I said quietly. "But good summers don't excuse bad winters." Meanwhile, the town gossip thickened. Lila's mother apparently told everyone at her bridge club that I'd schemed my way into their property. That I'd trapped Charles and manipulated him into signing papers. Funny how people rewrite stories when the truth offends them. When I ran into Lila at the bank, she looked pale and uncomfortable. "Margaret," she said awkwardly, "I'm sorry things got ugly." "Got?" I said. "They started ugly." Her eyes darted away. "Ethan's been looking for work out of state. Maybe it's for the best." "For all of us," I said. She hesitated. "He's not a bad man, you know." I smiled, tired but sincere. "No, he's just one who never learned how to say thank you." One evening, as autumn rolled in and the days grew shorter, I sat at the kitchen table reviewing documents from Natalie about the trust. Each line item, each beneficiary note felt like a stitch repairing something that had been torn inside me. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Mrs. Carter," a woman's voice said. "This is Detective Powell from the county office." My heart skipped. "Yes." "We received a complaint regarding a property transfer. A Mr. Ethan Carter claims his stepmother conducted a fraudulent sale." "Of course." I took a slow breath. "And what's your role in this, detective?" "We're required to verify ownership records. Would you be able to provide documentation?" "With pleasure," I said, glancing at the folder on the table. "Would you like the tax receipts too? I've kept every one since 2001. The detective chuckled softly. "I think that'll do. Sounds like you've handled this before." "I raised a lawyer's son," I said dryly. "I had to." 2 days later, I received confirmation that the case had been dismissed. The deed was airtight, the paperwork flawless. Ethan had nothing left to stand on but his pride, and even that was sinking fast. But that wasn't the end. Late one evening, there was a knock at my door. I expected Charles or maybe a neighbor. But when I opened it, Ethan stood there, not angry this time, not loud. Just tired. He looked thinner. His clothes wrinkled, his eyes dull. For a moment, I didn't see the arrogant man who'd humiliated me at dinner. I saw the lost boy whose mother left too soon, the one I'd tried so hard to fill the gap for. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around the home he once called his own. "You changed the curtains," he said absently. "I did." He sat down at the kitchen table, hands folded. "You win, Margaret. Are you happy?" "This isn't a game," I said. "It feels like one." "No," I said calmly. "Games have rules. You broke every one." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I was stupid. I was angry." "You were cruel," I corrected softly. He flinched. "I thought if I pushed you away, I'd finally stop feeling like I owed you." I sat down across from him. "And how's that working for you?" He didn't answer. For a moment, the silence stretched long and fragile. Then he said, "I've lost everything, Margaret. Lila left. The money's gone. I just wanted to feel like a man for once, not someone living off my father's wife." I felt something stir in me, not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. The kind that comes when pain meets reflection. "You wanted to feel powerful," I said. "So you made someone else small." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." The words hung between us, fragile, real. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just said, "Good. Now do something with it." When he left that night, I knew something had changed. He didn't ask for money. He didn't beg for help. He just said goodbye quietly, and walked into the cool night air. After he was gone, I looked at the chair where he'd sat, the same one he used to spill juice on when he was a kid, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The plan was working. Not because I'd won, but because he was finally losing what he needed to, his arrogance. Before I tell you what happened when he came back months later, with something I never expected him to bring, ask yourself this. If the person who hurt you finally said, "I'm sorry," would you open the door to forgiveness, or close it forever to protect your peace? Winter came early that year, the kind that painted frost on windows and forced silence between people who didn't know how to talk anymore. It had been 3 months since Ethan's visit, 3 quiet months where I thought maybe the storm had passed. But storms, I've learned, don't end until they take what they came for. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. A cream-colored envelope with gold trim. Inside, a formal note. Charles and Ethan Carter request your presence at a family dinner, December 12th, 6 p.m., at the Riverside Country Club. For a moment, I just stared at it. The same club where we'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations. The same place Ethan once refused to let me sit beside him. Charles found me still holding the card when he came into the kitchen. "I thought it might be good for everyone," he said carefully. "Good," I repeated. "Since when does good start with a trap?" He sighed. "He's trying, Margaret. He wants to apologize." "Apologies don't need chandeliers and an audience," I said. "He wants to do it publicly," he continued. "To make it right." I looked at him for a long moment. The man I'd stood beside for 3 decades looked older now, wearier. He wanted peace more than pride, and maybe I owed him that much. "All right," I said. "But if this turns into a show, I'm walking out." The night of the dinner, I wore my navy wool coat and a pearl necklace Charles had given me on our 10th anniversary. My hair was silver now, neatly pinned back, and though I looked calm, inside my stomach twisted. When I walked into the dining hall, all conversation seemed to pause. Ethan stood near the table, hands clasped, posture stiff. He looked like a man preparing to face a firing squad. Beside him stood Lila, quiet but present, her expression unreadable. Charles smiled weakly and guided me to my seat. The same table, the same one from months ago. I almost laughed at the cruel symmetry of it. Dinner began awkwardly. Forks clinked, small talk fluttered like nervous birds, and nobody said what they really wanted to. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something," he began, standing up. I set my fork down. "Go ahead," I said softly. He took a deep breath. "I was wrong. About that night, about everything. I said things I didn't mean." I raised an eyebrow. "Which part? The part where you called me a burden, or the part where you left me to pay the bill?" He winced. "Both," he said quietly. "All of it." The room fell silent. Even the waiters seemed to slow their steps. He continued, voice trembling slightly. "I was angry, bitter, and proud. I thought Dad's money made me entitled to more than I earned. You tried to warn me, and I punished you for it. I made a fool of myself, and worse of you." Charles's eyes glistened. Lila reached out and touched Ethan's arm gently. I folded my hands in my lap. "Why now?" I asked. He swallowed. "Because I finally understand what you did, and why. You didn't sell that house to destroy me. You sold it to save me from becoming a man who thought he owned everything just because someone gave it to him." For the first time since that awful dinner, there was no defensiveness in his tone. No sarcasm. Just truth. He looked at me then, eyes steady. "I came tonight to give you something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a cashier's check, $27,000. "I don't want your money," I said immediately. "It's not charity," he replied. "It's repayment. For the bills, the mortgage, the years you carried me. It's not even close to enough, but it's what I can do." Charles blinked in surprise. "Ethan." He turned to his father. "I didn't get it right when I was living in your house. I don't want to repeat that mistake somewhere else." He faced me again. "I've started my own business. Small renovation work. I'm earning my own money now. I wanted you to know that your lesson worked." I stared at him, the check trembling slightly between us. For months, I had imagined what revenge would feel like, vindication, satisfaction, maybe even peace. But standing there, hearing his voice tremble as he tried to rebuild something he'd broken, all I felt was something simpler, release. I reached out, took the check gently, and folded it back into the envelope. "Keep it," I said. He frowned. But keep it, I repeated. Use it to build something that's yours. Just promise me you'll never let pride cost you another home. His throat tightened. I promise. Then came the sound of slow clapping from the far end of the table. It was Robert, Charles's brother, a man who never missed a chance to stir the pot. Well, he said dryly, isn't that touching? The woman sells her stepson's house, and he thanks her for it. Ethan stiffened. Uncle, please. No, let him finish, I said, calm as ever. Robert smirked. You always were clever, Margaret. Got your husband, got his house, and now you've got the moral high ground too. Lila's face turned red. That's not fair, she said. Robert leaned back. Fair? I'd call it poetic. You teach a man a lesson by taking everything he owns. How noble. The table tensed. Charles started to speak, but I raised a hand. You're right, Robert, I said evenly. It wasn't noble. It was necessary. Because sometimes the only way to teach gratitude is to remove comfort. Robert scoffed. And what did it cost you? A family. I met his gaze. No, I said. It gave me one, the honest kind. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Then, slowly, Ethan stood again. Uncle, he said quietly, you don't have to understand it. But don't insult her for doing what I was too cowardly to do. Take responsibility. Robert's smirk faltered. He looked around, realized no one was laughing, and finally dropped his eyes to his plate. Charles reached for my hand under the table. You did good, he whispered. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. When dessert came, Ethan asked if I'd take a photo with him. I hesitated, then nodded. The waiter snapped the picture, an older woman with silver hair and calm eyes standing beside a man finally humble enough to call her mother. As I looked at that photo later, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes, it looks like redemption. But before I tell you what happened when Ethan called me 6 months later, asking me to be part of something that made every hardship worth it, let me ask you this. If forgiveness is the final act of revenge, are you strong enough to give it? Or would you rather keep the power it gives you? Spring came early that year, washing away the cold that had lingered too long. I'd started spending mornings on the porch again, sipping coffee and listening to the birds that nested near the oak tree. Life had gone still, almost peaceful, but in the quiet, you can always tell when something's about to change. It was a Wednesday morning when the phone rang. The caller ID read, Ethan. For a moment, I just stared at it, unsure whether to answer. Then curiosity, or maybe something softer, won. Hi Ethan, I said. His voice came through calm, steady. Hi Margaret. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, I said, though I could hear the hesitation in his tone. I wanted to ask you something, he said. But I'd rather do it in person. I hesitated. You're in town. Yes, he said. Could I stop by this afternoon? Of course. When I hung up, I realized my hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from something closer to anticipation. He arrived right on time, dressed neatly this time, hair trimmed, wearing a faded denim jacket that made him look like the boy I used to drive to school. He carried a small box in his hand. When I opened the door, he smiled nervously. You look good, Margaret. Thank you, I said. You do too. He stepped inside, glancing around at the living room. The air between us felt gentler this time. No tension, no accusation. He placed the box on the coffee table and took a deep breath. I came because there's something I need to say properly. The last time we spoke, I said sorry, but it didn't feel like enough. You said what mattered, I told him. He shook his head. No, I said what made me feel better. I didn't say what you deserved to hear. I stayed silent, letting him find his words. He looked me in the eye then, his voice clear. You didn't just give me a home. You gave me a second chance at having a mother. And I ruined that. You taught me discipline, how to work hard, how to think before I speak, and I threw it all away because I was too proud to admit you'd done more for me than anyone. My chest tightened. It wasn't the apology itself that moved me, it was the man finally saying it. He pushed the box toward me. Open it. Inside was a set of silver keys and a small envelope. I frowned. What's this? He smiled faintly. I bought a place. A fixer-upper in Maple Ridge. Needs a lot of work, but it's mine. And I want you to see it. I stared at the keys, then back at him. You didn't need to bring me these. I did, he said softly. Because you taught me what owning something really means. It's not just about deeds or money. It's about taking care of what's yours. I smiled slowly, feeling tears rise despite myself. You finally learned the right kind of ownership. He nodded. Thanks to you. Charles came home midway through our conversation, and when he saw Ethan sitting on the couch, his face lit up. Well, this is a surprise, he said, voice thick with emotion. Ethan stood to greet him. Hey, Dad. For a moment, they just looked at each other, no words needed. Then Charles pulled him into a hug, one that had been waiting too long to happen. When they sat down, Ethan turned back to me. There's one more thing. I'm getting married again. I blinked. Already? He laughed softly. No, not yet. We're taking it slow. Her name's Kara, she works with me at the renovation company. We've been together almost a year. I nodded, genuinely happy for him. She's a lucky woman. He hesitated, then added, we're having a small ceremony this summer. No big show. Just family and close friends. I wanted to ask if you'd come as my mother. The word landed like a heartbeat. Mother. Not stepmother. Not Margaret. Just mother. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. Finally, I managed, I'd be honored. He smiled, relief softening his whole face. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. A field behind a renovated farmhouse, string lights glowing as the sun dipped below the trees. Ethan stood at the altar, calm and proud, while I sat beside Charles, hands folded in my lap. Lila didn't come, she'd moved on, as she should have. Life had sorted itself in the quiet, honest way it does when you stop forcing it. When the officiant asked to bless this union, Ethan turned, looked straight at me, and said, my mother does. The guests turned, some smiling, some wiping tears. I stood, nodding once. Always. And for the first time in years, the title didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. After the ceremony, he came to where I was sitting. You were right, you know, he said quietly. About what? About lessons. They don't come cheap. I chuckled. No, they don't. He tilted his head. Do you ever regret it? Selling the house? I thought for a moment, then said, no. Because that house wasn't a home anymore. It was a reminder of how far we'd drifted. Letting it go gave us room to start again. He nodded slowly. I'm glad you did. Otherwise, I might never have learned how to build one myself. When everyone left that evening, and the lights dimmed, Charles and I sat under the oak trees, the night full of quiet laughter and distant music. He reached for my hand. You did the impossible, Margaret. What's that? You fixed something that money and anger couldn't. I smiled faintly. I didn't fix him, Charles. I just stopped breaking myself for him. He squeezed my hand gently. You're stronger than anyone I know. Maybe, I said softly. But strength doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it's walking away until they realize what you were worth. Months later, I framed a photo from that day, Ethan and Kara smiling under the string lights, my hand resting lightly on his shoulder. I placed it beside the old photo from years ago, the one from before everything fell apart. 2 pictures, side by side. One showing what we once were. The other showing what we'd become. I realized then that life rarely gives us perfect endings, just full circles. Before I end this story, let me ask you something. If someone you loved betrayed you, and later stood before you asking for forgiveness, would you hold on to the power their guilt gave you, or let go, and finally heal both of you at once? Because sometimes, the truest revenge isn't in making them pay. It's in watching them finally learn.